I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. In A Course in Miracles, it says that the voice for God only ever asks one question: are you ready yet to help me save the world? In Rob Bresney's astrology, Real Astrology Substack, he uses wisdom teachers in order to bring that through horoscopes to empower people. And one thing he mentioned in this week's was quoting Rabbi Mark Gelman, who says that there are only 4 prayers, which are gimme, thanks, oops, and wow. And to that, he added a 5th, which is, how can I help? In what I was reading today in A Course in Miracles, it said, nothing is ever lost except time, which in the end is meaningless. But since you believe in it, why bother wasting it? So I want to ask today and look at, why is it that we're not ready quite yet to save the world? And how can we help each other become more ready? Because I think that thinking clearly is what we're meant to be doing, and that I need you in order to help me think clearly, and the reverse, that we only really think together because we're not individual. We're synapses, we're conduits, we're not silo knowledge, which is why I'm bringing my whole self here and not separating things into metaphysics, spirituality, politics, economics, mathematics, science, art, and creativity. I think all of these things need to be put together because we are just the way that that intersects everything. So I'm going to be doing that both with viewer comments and also with things that I've been reading. So let's get started. So how do we help one another think clearly? I think the message needs to be, you are magnificent. And here's where I think you're mistaken. So there are 3 categories of where someone could be mistaken. One is the facts. Second is the logic. And then the third is inconsistency with core beliefs. As I've stated, I have only one core belief, which is that I am no better than anyone else. And so if I am not being consistent with that, I want people to tell me. If I'm not having enough faith in other people, I want someone to tell me that. Because I think that if I could be absolutely consistent on that, I would be the Christ. Because the Christ is a way of thinking, is a way of seeing everyone else as the Christ. And so if any of us were actually doing that, we'd be able to be ready to save the world. And so would everyone else, because we have that synapse with each other. I want to start with the magnificent Milan Innocent, who sends me notes on every episode. From the last episode, Thinking Clearly About Empire on John Campbell, she wrote, I know better than someone else needs to be renounced on spiritual and economic grounds. And I want to clarify that, because I am better is very different in an important way than I know better. If I didn't feel like I knew better, I would have no reason to ever talk again. The only reason for us to be communicating with each other is because we think that we can help both of us get to a different place. And so being able to be systematic and not be egotistical about that is a really important thing. If I think I am better than someone else, then I'm basing the fact that I'm right on my authority. I'm not basing it on our 3 categories of facts, logic, and what we'll call dogma. So let's look at facts. I think one of the biggest disinformation campaigns, deeper than that, because it's an attack on information itself, is convincing us that facts don't exist. And in one episode, I mentioned that I had 30 years of futile arguments with my mom before I finally realized that she didn't believe in the existence of facts. So there really was nothing that I could ever say, because to her, it was about one authority versus another. I think a big way that we've been convinced to give over our own authority to think is to be convinced that there are no facts, which is part of right now this whole attack on science. The second is looking at logic, and something that Milan wrote about the three categories that I had in theology was that there are not just three possibilities. The possibilities are infinite. So those three categories are: God is a monster, which is to say that the world has been created by someone who wants the world to be exactly the way it is, with things like death in it, just to be blunt. And the second possibility is that there is no God. So that would say that the world has created itself, and we have created ourselves. And then the third possibility is that the world doesn't exist. So that would be saying that rather than our minds existing in the world, that the world exists in our mind. And so plural minds in the flesh-encapsulated mind, as A Course in Miracles would say, or the singular mind in which the world can be our collective delusion. I don't know of any other possibilities, but I'm open to it if someone could give me that. From our conversation on the God is a monster theme, I recommended to Joey Lundgren that he go and watch my interdependence versus inner being episode, where I talk about the zealots and my research on the real story of Jesus. And his response was so funny. He said that he remembers when he was told the story of Jesus as a little boy, and it was like this. Okay, little boy Joey, we're going to tell you this really exciting story. Are you ready to hear it? Okay. Yeah, well, here it goes. Once there was this perfect puppy, and he was awesome and innocent and way smart too. And we killed him, but we killed him for your sins, for everything bad that you have ever done and that you're going to do. And so isn't that great? And little boy Joey saying, and so Joey said that if he ever had a son or a daughter, that he would like to pull them aside and say, hey, you're a really dope dude. And that story that you've been told, well, don't repeat this, to your mom or to the priest, but fuck that shit. And what do you want to go create? Because you are not that person. And so he always wondered, it's like, why would God create Jesus perfect and innocent, and why God wouldn't create me that way? I think we have to not give up on those questions that we asked when we really were thinking clearly. And if anyone wants a very grown-up version of the little Joey question, I cannot recommend highly enough this book, Constantine's Sword by James Carroll. This is one of the cornerstones of my thinking. It changed the whole direction. It looks at that question of the sacrificial lamb and the whole theology that believes in the kind of God who requires sacrifice. And then it looks at it that it just wasn't we who killed Jesus, it was the Jews, and how that perception of that blood libel has affected the persecution of the Jews, especially during the reading of the Passion, and how that led to pogroms and has colored our thinking ever since. Joey also posted some questions about what this idea of renouncing your specialness means, which is also what Milan was talking about. And I've said in my parenting video that the most important message that you can give your child is you are the most special person in the universe, and so is your sister, and so is everyone else. And that paradox is, I think, what is critical to be believing about ourselves. So let's look at what that would mean in terms of renouncing that specialness and how it affects our being ready to save the world. That specialness is like having that little corner of empire in our mind that we're attached to. It's like, well, I want to get rid of all of this empire that is weighing down on me, but there's this part that actually kind of works for me, and I don't really want to give up my superiority to those people. That's the thing that I think keeps the empire happening and keeps us not really ready for system change. That we think we can change this thing and that thing and tweak this and reform that. But system change, that would take way too long and be way too hard. But nothing is harder or takes longer than doing the impossible. And trying to change any little part of that without changing everything, without renouncing empire thinking entirely, is impossible. Now I want to go to the magnificent Carrie from Valencia. Let me tell you why first Carrie is magnificent. When she was here, she instigated 4 different chapters of a group called Dining for Women, where women get together and have a potluck and learn about a global cause for women, and then they donate whatever they would have spent on dinner out to that cause. Brilliant idea. And then she also is a dynamo. She is, with my daughter Veronica, one of the best people I've known for taking care of people and places, that she really tends her relationships and also sets boundaries to make sure that her relationships feed her instead of draining her. And she and Veronica are just wonderful at being able to take care of a home. And as I've said, you don't own a home owns you. And like any living thing, if you don't maintain it, it will bite you in the ass. And so for she and Veronica, places just bloom under her care. That the smallest details of things and how to practically do things yourself is a quality that they both excel in. But I've also learned so much from her at being able to let go. I never thought that she would give up her home here and travel off to another country and start a whole new life. And in terms of taking responsibility for her stuff and how to recirculate it, I have so much to learn, because it's easy to throw things away, but I don't have it in me to do it. I lost complete respect for that woman who has made a career out of telling people how to get rid of stuff the moment I heard that she was taking entire bags of trash and tossing them. So what Carrie has done is do things like have wardrobes that are open at her parties, where all the clothes that she was getting rid of for this move, she had friends who just would take whatever they wanted and then donate whatever they wanted to a charity that she had chosen. So it makes it a gift, it makes it a trade, and it makes it a donation. So it brings it around full circle, and someone gets something that they really value. In my case, many of my favorite things have come from Carrie, and it also then passes on the gift. So here's where I think the magnificent Carrie is mistaken. In our conversation about Ukraine, Carrie wrote, "And I know you're too smart to fall for the neo-Nazi narrative." So referring to the people who were funded and armed by the U.S. in the 2014 coup against Ukraine. So in that, the first thing to dissect is the existence of facts, that looking at whether the definition of neo-Nazi is something that we can agree on, rather than it just being a shorthand for evil, the way that fascist has become. Once we agree on that, whether that's how people define themselves or whether they meet that definition is something that exists or doesn't. I don't want to debate that at this point. I just want to look at the logic. And this logical point is, I think, a rhetorical trick, that any time we say to someone else, "You're too smart to think that way," what we're putting them in the position of is either saying, maybe I'm not that smart, or yes, I agree with you because I want to be smart. So that is something I don't think we should be doing with one another, because it also is saying that whoever thinks that way is not as smart as we are. Now, I may agree or disagree with those people, but I wouldn't say that I'm smarter than them because I don't think I'm better than they are. On the topic of Ukraine, in my open tabs, Glenn Greenwald has a wonderful article that's very comprehensive called "War Propaganda About Ukraine is Becoming Increasingly Militaristic, Authoritarian, and Reckless." And what he focuses on is how dissent is being vilified and how it is being controlled, and that there is this frenzy in terms of pushing us towards war. And then Matt Taibbi has an article called "Putin the Apostate." And the byline is, "We thought he would be our bastard, but it turns out he's his own bastard." Taibbi lived in Russia during Putin's rise, and so he has a lot of inside perspective that was very informative. And it turns out that corruption is not just limited to the United States. So this is an informative view that should belie this idea that he is an apologist for Putin, but does not contradict the perspective of what the politics are talking about right now. Caitlin Johnstone has an article called "Every U.S. Enemy is Hitler," in which she says, "You are either someone who believes that maintaining a hostile client state on Russia's border is worth any amount of brinkmanship to accomplish, or you're someone who understands what nuclear war is. And if the escalating tensions don't scare the shit out of you, it's because you don't understand, or you are so psychologically compartmentalized away from what you do understand." And then on Tom Dispatch, Andrew Bacevich has a really delightful article called "Reflections from the Netherworld," which is advice from JFK to Joe Biden. And in this, JFK does a very candid job of recounting his failures, but he also says, here's where I didn't fail. When they put up the Berlin Wall, I did nothing. And in retrospect, that was a great thing. And I had this back channel to Khrushchev where we negotiated a peace settlement. And no matter what kinds of names I got called at the time, now from my perspective, I can see that was a great success. That's what you want your legacy to be. And the last thing I read this week on Ukraine was Putin's own words, a translation by Bloomberg News of the speech that he gave on February 24th. In that, he lays out his intentions. And I think that if you're going to figure out why someone's doing anything, you have to start with why they say they're doing it. So I think that's worthwhile for everyone to read and to look at his facts and to look at his logic and see where it is that you might disagree. but you can't jump to his conclusions and disagree with those unless you can point to where the facts or the logic are wrong. He ends with a very interesting way of imploring the Ukrainian soldiers, where what he says is, lay down your arms. Your fathers, your grandfathers, your great-grandfathers fought against the Nazis, not so that you could fight for the neo-Nazis. We have no quarrel with the Ukrainian people or the military. We are only going to hold responsible the Ukrainian administration that is holding Ukraine hostage. So time will tell whether that is true or not, but I think JFK has some good advice from the grave. So I hope that we continue to help each other think clearly by challenging our facts, our logic, our consistency, and by recognizing our magnificence. If you like this, here's the original one where I think clearly about empire, and here is a playlist on ideology and equality, which I recommend if you've already seen that one. And I hope that you join our community and subscribe. Thank you.